All right, welcome back. I'm continuing to work on some of the wiring off camera. You guys have probably seen enough of that, so you don't need to see more. Got a little of that done earlier today, but didn't really record any of it. I've kind of reached a stopping point. I'm waiting for a distribution fuse block to arrive so I can keep on that progress. So I thought I'd shift over to some motor stuff. You guys probably enjoy that better. And so let me show you what I got. Okay, I've got both of the motors sitting here, one on a stand, one on the hoist, so I can kind of compare some things. I'm going to take some measurements. I want to do a good job recording some of these measurements for anyone in the future who might be looking at a swap to kind of know what they're getting into, though it won't necessarily apply to everyone. And I've got a table laid out with some parts. Probably not going to get to the exhaust or this dipstick tube, but they're here. These are gaskets for that intake manifold. We'll get to that in a second. 92 millimeter throttle body from Holley. This is going to be the bracket that I'm going to attempt to get to work to hold power steering pump and alternator. That's all I'm running. I'm no AC, no water pump. I'm running an electric water pump, so this should just do power steering and alternator. I'm hoping I can make that work without the water pump in place. We're going to find out. These are adjustable brackets for the motor mount, so these should be able to allow me to locate the motor where I need to. These are adapters for the front of the block to be able to run an electric water pump. This is a thermostat oil cooler. So on the LT engines, over here on the side, you've got some provisions for an oil cooler. This should bolt up to that and allow me to run a remote oil cooler. I think the stock oil cooler sits right here. I'm not sure how much cooling it's doing right below the headers, but this will allow me to run the oil cooler, and I'm also running an oil accumulator. So that'll get attached. And then this is a power steering pump. I guess I should have pulled out of the package to show you guys, but it's just a stock power steering pump. So we'll kind of play with some of that mounting. The other thing I need to do is this is not mounted on, and lighting might not be great, but the clearance between the bottom of this LT2 intake, so this intake is off of an LT2, which had some sort of different setup here, but there's a clearance issue between the high pressure fuel pump that sits back here and the bottom of this intake. So I need to melt this, heat it up, and kind of push it in just a little bit, maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and that should give me the clearance I need. I mean, it's really close right now, but it's just not quite sitting flush. So we'll work on that. And then I am going to take some measurements here in terms of distance between the motor mount and the bell housing surface here, some of the clutch measurements and things like that, so I can get an idea of where to put things. Okay, so I realize maybe not the most accurate method, but it should be get me close enough for what I need. So we're going to go from this face to go to the inside edge of the back. This motor mount, it looks like I'm looking at 14 1/4 inches. Let me just go off of the 1-inch mark in case the end of this is a little off. Yeah, still the same. 15 1/4 inches, maybe just a hair shy of that, but It should get me close enough to figure out where I want to put it on the other motor. Got the other one soaking, the other motor mount. I got both motor mounts off, and I've got the other one soaking. I got this side cleaned up a little bit. This guy, something like this. And this is the ICT billet adapter plate. There are a few out there on the market. I think there's one made by Dirty Dingo that's actually more adjustable than this one, but I'm pretty sure this one should be adjustable enough. All right, still a little loose, but I just kind of wanted to get it snug for some fitment, and we'll kind of start test fitting stuff. And I'm waiting on some motor mounts to show up. Hopefully those will be here in a few days, and we'll be able to get this kind of dressed up and slide it in the hole over there and see how she fits. To see, but they do have just a little bit of gap. The gaskets aren't actually in here yet, so that'll probably add a little bit to it. I don't have these bolts, so I'm gonna have to get those. So I can't really mount this evening, but should be ready to go. Here. First is spacing for this isn't right, so I'm probably gonna need a different alternator or maybe to cut up this bracket. Not sure. I kind of want to see the Holley terminator wire harness to see how it, if it connects to this or how exactly it connects to the alternator. If it's just using a single wire alternator or something more fancy. So that should hopefully show up in the next couple of days. I can take a look at that, and that'll determine what alternator I get. The other issue I'm running into is that the spacing for this bracket kit, I think is for the truck pulley spacing, and I'm wanting to use the Camaro and the Corvette pulley spacing, which is only 4.91 inches from the face of the block out to the tip of the harmonic balancer. This distance here, the truck is like, I think almost 6 inches out, so it's a much taller off the front of the block accessory system. So I'd like to run the narrower accessory system. I've been told the truck accessory system will actually fit in this by one other person who's done this swap into a C4, so we shall see. I'd still like to run the narrower system if I can, since I'm not running a water pump off the front. So we'll see if I can get that done. The other issue I ran into was this motor plate. So it's hitting this vacuum delete plate, or it would be hitting a vacuum pump if it were there. So I can't actually pull this up flush. I think I'm going to have to cut, either look for a different solution or cut a big chunk off of the kind of the front corner off of this bracket here to be able to use the stock style motor mounts that fit in here. So I got to do some research there and see what I can find. I am missing the O-ring that goes here, so I'm not going to hook up that throttle body. Basically, I don't know that I got a whole lot done, but I learned a lot, so we'll do some research and come back to see what else we can get done later. Okay, just to get an idea of what spacing we might be looking at here, I'm going to measure, or see if I can get a reasonable measure here, from the back of the block here to the front of this pulley is like right at, or maybe just shy of 27 inches. So let's turn this around here. And back of the block to the front of the back block are at 20 and a half. So 6.5 inches off the front for the pulley would be roughly the same spacing. So I think the truck is at 6 point. I'll have to look it up, but it's going to be close. So the truck pulley system might actually clear if I need to do that. I still want to try and get the narrower pulley working, because if you know your C4s, this harmonic balancer is really close to the power steering rack. So if I can avoid it, I'd like to. We're going to try and get these motor mounts on there. I have a solution after talking to someone online, actually on a Facebook group, about how to fix this interference thing, so we'll get to that. And I've got some long tube headers. I'll talk about that when we get there, but I'm going to get those mocked up, and then I would like to make sure everything kind of fits and squeezes in there. So once I get the motor mounts on and the headers on, we're going to drop it into the engine bay. For fitment, check everything there. And then once it's in, I need to take some measurements kind of across here and figure out where accessories can go, what blockages we might run into, and then we'll probably try and work on getting some accessories mounted up. I have the clutch and flywheel, so we might go ahead and get that in, or at least the flywheel, as well as the harmonic balancer, and we'll see where things go from there. I've got a table full of parts over there. Ignore the polyurethane. That was for a honeydew list project, but most of that's parts over there, so we'll try and see where we get with them from there. Okay, so let's talk about this solution a little bit. I really like this billet block-off plate. It's got these O-rings in it, but the problem is with these motor mounts, this thing is running into it pretty hard here in the corner. I would have to cut off a significant amount of this motor mount to be able to use this. So after talking to someone else who's done a similar swap, this has to go. So the solution are these just plugs. So these O-rings are blocking off the oil flow here that powers a vacuum pump. And instead of the full block off plate, there's a couple of threaded plugs that you can thread these plugs in here. They've already got some sealer on the threads, so we'll thread those in. We still will have to clearance this just a tiny bit, but it should be significantly less than with that block off. Okay, got a couple marks on here, so I'll have to trim this a little bit. I don't think I'll have to trim it too much, but we'll start small, cut this up a little bit, and then come test fit it and see if we need to cut some more or if I got enough. All right, that mount bracket has been notched. You can kind of see there. So didn't have to notch it too much, just enough to kind of clear this little piece of the block. And without that block off plate covering this whole thing, I would have had to cut off a pretty large section of this bracket. So that feels good. Next up, I'm going to put these motor mount brackets. They are from After Dark Speed. I really like their stuff. I've got a lot of their suspension components. They make a lot of good components for C4 Corvettes. So I'm going to put these motor mounts on there. They're not solid, but they are pretty stiff compared to the stock ones. And they've got some height adjustment, so I'll be able to change up these spacers and get the motor where I wanted. So I'm going to throw these on these mounts and then hook up the hoist and maybe drop this. Well, actually, I'm going to put on some headers. I'll show you this after they get these installed. For these headers, picked up some Speed Engineering swap headers. They're meant for the Gen 5 LT motors to actually be swapped into a C10, which has a fairly narrow frame. So I'm reasonably confident that these will work, but I'm not 100%. So we'll test fit them. They were pretty cheap. Seems like, I don't know a lot about Speed Engineering. From what I've read online, it seems like it's reasonable quality and pretty inexpensive. So, you know, for I think right around 300 bucks, it was worth the gamble that these will fit. I think they will based on some other pictures I saw, but we'll open them up, put them on, and see what we see. Welds all look pretty good. This is stainless steel. I'm not planning on throwing a coating on it. I don't really drive the cart in the rain or, you know, winter. Well, there is one video of me driving in the snow, but that's not a regular occurrence, so not too worried about that. I do have a clearance issue here with this heat shield. There's a sensor behind that, so I'm not sure if the sensor can stay. It just might be hot, I'm not sure, but we'll have to remove this heat shield. And then over on this side, I haven't sucked it all the way into the block, but maybe I should do that and then show you guys what's going on. If you did notice, I went ahead and ordered these spark plug wires. They've got a little bit of a bend on both ends. That is because of the design of these headers. They get really close to the primaries, the spark plugs do, so their recommendation on their website was order those special spark plug wires so that you can route it better away from the heat. So let me pull that heat shield off and suck these up to the block, and I'll give you a better look at how it fits. Okay, let me try and get you in here. I'm going to try and do this, hold the light with one hand so you can kind of see what's going on. They are, maybe I'll set this light down. They are cinched up. I didn't go super tight, and I didn't put all the bolts in, just they're doing it for fitment right now. So that heat shield that I mentioned earlier did have to come off.
there is, maybe hard to see, less than a finger's, the thickness of my finger between the top of the sensor and the primary. So I might have to either relocate this sensor or just try and put some heat shielding around it other than the stock one. But you can kind of see the clearance there. Pretty tight to the block. And on this side, I went ahead and threw the starter in there, just hand tight on one of those bolts. It is all the way up against the block, but obviously the one bolt's not all the way in, but you can kind of see the clearance on the starter. And yeah, the design of these primaries is slightly different from side to side. So I think next I'll probably throw the balancer on the front and then maybe drop this in.
Well, maybe I'm not going to throw this on tonight.
This is the stock. It's a new one. I've got the old one too. Harmonic or balancer crank bolt, and it doesn't quite fit inside of this hub, this ATI super damper. So I'm not sure if I need a different bolt or what. I'm going to have to do some research. So guess that's not going on right now. get in here now. Now that I've got this thing in here, I've got the motor mounts reasonably tightened down. They're not, you know, torqued down, but they're close enough to get an idea of what we're dealing with here. Looks like I'm probably going to have plenty of space. I am running narrower Corvette style, Camaro style spacing on the lower pulley and the accessories, so I should have plenty of room there. And actually much more room than I was expecting. On this side, this header clears. I'll get down in a minute underneath and kind of show you, but it looks pretty good all the way down. Got plenty of room for the steering shaft, which let's see, runs a little bit more like that, and pretty clearance for, this is just flopping here, so this won't remain here. This is the hydraulic line for the clutch, but plenty of clearance for everything on this side. You did see me have to pull this windshield wiper motor. I do need the wiper motor for passing a safety inspection here in Missouri. However, I was kind of warned that the wiper motor would not clear, and indeed it doesn't. There's not enough space there, but I already have an S10 wiper motor that I ordered that will have to be modified, but it should fit in that location, and still allow me to have wipers, and it should have the clearance I need. So we'll mess with that at some later date. Let's see, what can we see down here? It's hard to see with this light, but clearance all the way around. I left the mount on the motor for the stand, and it's cleared. Go around to this side. We are super tight there. There's you know, a few thousandths inch here. Actually, no, it's touching, but little movement. So once we get the transmission in there and get that bolted in, we'll have to kind of pay attention to the clearance there on that corner. Let's see here. This plate here was added to cover a hole. It's not part of the original Corvette, so I can notch that a little bit there. What's behind it is fiberglass, so that I'll have to just pay attention to. On this side, this header I don't think will work. There's a possibility I could hammer in the collector down at the bottom and get it to clear. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I may attempt it, I might not, I'm not sure at this point. But as it is, I wish I could, I probably need 4 hands to kind of show you. Maybe, yeah, it's hard to show, but it's close, but not close enough. It's hitting the passenger side of the transmission tunnel down there, and I can't get it to get flush with get the flange to be flush with the head when I attempt to bolt it on because of that clearance. So I don't think it's going to work, which means I'm going to have to use like ram horn style or some sort of OEM style exhaust header that just points straight down and then goes back. I did put 2 of those spacers on those motor mounts. I left the third one off because at the front this it's got a Holley swap pan on it, but there is not a lot of clearance right now between this pan and the frame here. So options include, I could attempt to notch this frame just a little bit. It wouldn't take much because the back of the frame you can kind of see is right here. And so I'd have to notch maybe 1 inch by 1 inch section, if that, to make sure there's clearance. I may go ahead and do that just to make sure I'm not rubbing it all as the motor vibrates. And I can probably drop it down, another 1/2 inch. Now that I'm talking, I'm actually wondering if dropping it down another 1/2 inch with those spacers would give me the clearance to get this header in there. There's a possibility. So yeah, we will try that tomorrow. I'm not sure. It's approaching midnight here tonight, so I'm about ready to shut it down. But let me show you underneath real quick if I can. Okay. This might be hard to illustrate, but let me see if I can get. Okay. That right there is about level with the bottom of the pan. You can kind of see the front of the pan disappears. It gets level. Well, at least level how the motor's sitting right now, I guess. And it's pretty even with the frame. So dropping it down another 1/2 inch might give me some minor clearance issues. So I'll have to take a tape measure probably tomorrow and kind of mess with that, figure out what I want to do. Try to get in here, but up in there, you can kind of start to see how tight the very front and bottom of that oil pan is. Like I said, it wouldn't take much to notch that a little bit, so I think I'll probably go ahead and do that. On this side, you can kind of see that collector sits right about even with the bottom of the floor pan. There's kind of floor pan. So again, and the front of the collector actually drops down a little bit lower. So that would be a low point right now. And if I drop another 1/2 inch, it'll definitely be a low point. But maybe sacrifice how I want to do. So obviously putting transmission in here will change things as well. So